Hi everyone and welcome back to SwitchUp and to a video where we're going to look at the new Road 96 game called Mile Zero, which we're both pretty excited about. I absolutely loved the original, completed it multiple times, and a big thanks to the publisher for working with us to bring you this early look at the game. We'll go through everything you need to know about the game. Obviously I know there are a lot of fans out there, so do ask your questions down in the comments. And as with any sponsored video, we do like to give away a copy. You can also save yourself 5% on eShop credit over at switchup.gg until this coming Sunday using code SwitchUp. And we get a little kickback as well from Nintendo for that one. So Road 96 Mile Zero, what's it all about? Well, let's find out.
So let's start with the story then. Now this is a prequel to Road 96 and it focuses on two characters in particular. The characters here are Zoe and Kaito. Now those of you that have played the first game may well recognise Zoe as she was in that game too, whereas Kaito was actually in another game from the development team, a game called Lost in Harmony. Now this tells the story of the two characters and their friendship. It's set in the same nation as Road 96 and it starts to show the regime, shall we say, and how it affects both of the characters' lives. It of course then leads into the events of Road 96.
So Glenn, I want to ask a question about this one. So in terms of that narrative, you said it's set within its own country. How does that work?
So to move back to Road 96 for a moment, that game focused on the idea of a group of teenagers trying to leave their nation, which was like an authoritarian state, and trying to reach the border. This kind of details how it got to that point, you know. So this is set in 1996, as was the first game, I believe. And as I mentioned, the two characters are friends. However, one lives quite a privileged life. Her daddy's quite high up in the government. I think he's like the minister for oil, something like that. And her friend Kaito is a worker. His family are workers. You know, they're kind of looked down upon. He lives in a poorer side of town. And it kind of details initially their friendship and how that doesn't matter, but then their differing views on the world because of their upbringings and how that causes tension between them and the clashes they have because of it, and ultimately how they resolve that, you know?
Nice one. That was a very succinct answer. So as far as the gameplay and controls go then, this one, I played the original and absolutely loved it, and this does quite a few new things, doesn't it? You have a rhythm-based element to the game, which is very interesting, and it's used for a lot of the dialogue.
Yeah, so basically, music plays quite a heavy part in the game. It's almost like a way of the characters expressing themselves. That's how it's used. So whenever you have a point where something needs to happen, it plays out via like an on-rails, almost like an auto-runner section, obviously to music. So for example, there's a part relatively early on where the character Zoe that I mentioned, she's got a bodyguard and they're trying to escape from him so they can go off and, you know, have fun and not be looked after or spied on, if you like. So this minigame then plays out where she's on roller skates and she's trying to escape him, and he appears as like a huge giant that's like towering over her, chasing her down the street, and then like you're making your way up a tower and his hands are coming through the walls. It's almost like has a moment of surrealism thrown in to show, you know, the basic movement of them just trying to run away from him, you know. It's quite clever. Yeah, I like it.
In a less deep way, I think those sections also reminded me a little bit of the bonus stages from Sonic. So you're moving freely, you can actually control the character, you can duck underneath obstacles, jump over them. For me personally, it's a much more interesting way of visually representing some of the decision making that's going on between the two characters. Outside of that, how does gameplay play out?
So you play in a first person perspective. You'll control both characters over the course of the story, starting mainly with Zoe. And you'll walk around, interact with objects, pick things up, etc. You'll need to make your way to various locations that you can do from your base. It's like a secret hideout that the two characters share, and then obviously moving to these areas will then trigger the next part of the story. So obviously you can go into those in any order, but ultimately you'll see all of them. But what does make a second playthrough viable is the fact that your decisions at each of those points will then change the overall course of the story, or of course the ending.
Okay, so that kind of brings me on to my next question. With Road 96, as the title explains, you're literally moving along a road. The events are all based around that road and the journey kind of reflects that. With this one, I'm guessing from what you've just said, doesn't quite follow that same formula?
Yeah, it's more of a hub or an area that you will go to. You'll visit certain places. Like I say, you'll see a character there that will then trigger a cutscene. Something will play out and you'll ultimately have a decision to make that will shape how things play out further on. So again, for example, there's one quite early on, I think it may be the first one that you come to, where again the two characters are talking about their experiences, and Kaito is trying to explain to Zoe that the world isn't as happy as she seems to think it is, and the dictator that's in charge is not as nice as maybe she's been brought up to believe. And again, it has one of these moments where you go along the path, as Mark just said, almost like a Sonic stage. But what's interesting is that it starts off with this lovely idyllic world that she's riding through, and he kind of interrupts and says, no, that's not what the world's like, look. And then he takes over and it shows a far more dystopian look. And then at the end of it, she has to make a decision whether she believes him or whether she wants to stay with this image that she's always had. And that leads on to the other part of the gameplay, which is the decision making and how it affects almost the courage of their convictions. In terms of Zoe, for example, she will either be staunch, a believer in the world that she's always had and been brought up in, or she'll start to doubt things. And obviously each decision will move you along the scale from one way or the other.
So yeah, that scale is shown up in the top left corner of the screen, and it has two images associated with it. Do we know what those mean?
Yeah, I think again they just refer to their two states of mind. So for example, Zoe's, I think, is a house and a light bulb. I think the house represents, again, just that idea of everything being the way she's always thought. She's happy at home, if you like, whereas the light bulb, I think, is the her being open to new ideas, new ways of thinking,
Yeah, that really makes sense to me. So you've got the security of the home, that's like the secure beliefs, and then you've got the questioning. Yeah, that works well, I like that.
What I liked about this system is that sometimes in games such as this, each decision you make is so black and white that you'll find yourself very quickly pushed down one end of the scale, even if you didn't really want to be, Whereas with this one, I tried to play it quite realistically in terms of the characters from what I'd seen of them. I wasn't really playing it as me, if that makes sense. And I found that a lot of the time I stayed almost in the middle, maybe just swaying towards one way or the other. You would still have some doubts and you would still answer questions or think the way you'd always thought, and then start to perhaps be swayed or keep with your initial thinking. I just think, it worked much better than I'd seen in other games in allowing you to not just have to jump from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, and I guess it's much more natural in that regard, because you would sometimes move on the questioning and other times the security side, and it doesn't penalise you for flowing freely and naturally between the two.
So let's move on to visuals then. It has that look about it of something like Life is Strange, it kind of has that low poly style to the characters, an open world that you can explore. It's quite a vibrant game in some respects. Obviously it does try to portray almost two worlds in one, if you know what I mean. You have the privileged life of some characters and the other side of town, if you like, and this is shown very well actually in good use of colour for both, and also just the way that characters will react to certain other characters in terms of possibly showing them respect or not, depending on where they're from.
Yeah, I mean, Road 96 had a very similar art style, and being completely honest, when I first played that game, I wasn't overly endeared by it, but it does very much fit the overall mood and feel of the game, and I feel like this is the same. What I will say for DigixArt Entertainment is here they've gone a step further in the overall world building. What Glen mentioned earlier was just a beautiful scene where the world splits into the two sides, and it shows that they are willing to take some risks. Now, there are lots of different collectibles and bits and bobs you can find as well, including tape cassettes and some stickers, but not really cosmetics or anything affecting the overall visuals of the game. In terms of performance, it's targeting 30 FPS, and it does seem to be able to maintain that better in handheld than it does in docked. Some areas are running quite well, but there are a couple of the larger ones where frame rates do dip a little.
So audio-wise, then, we've mentioned obviously that music is a big part of the game, and I was quite surprised actually to see that there are some licensed bands in here. I mean, there was one of the sections where you're running along, and I thought this really sounds like The Offspring, and it was, so that was quite interesting to see. And of course the game is voice acted too, and I do feel the voice actors do a good job here. Obviously there are some tender moments and some delicate issues being portrayed, and yeah, I think the voice acting certainly enhances the game in that respect.
So Road 96 Mile Zero then, it is a standalone experience. Although it's a prequel, you won't need to own the original to play this on your Nintendo Switch, and it retails at £9.99 or your regional equivalent, but there's a 25% discount if you own the original Road 96, which is a nice touch.
Yep, for that price you're getting a few hours worth of gameplay. I would estimate on a first playthrough maybe 4, but of course you can go back and replay it and make some different decisions, and then of course get yourself a different ending at the end of it, so there's certainly some replay value there too.
Yeah, on that point, it's exactly like the first. It's almost designed to be played multiple times to fully experience everything the story has to offer.
Absolutely. So that's everything you'd need to know really about Road 96 Mile Zero. A big thank you to the publishing team for sponsoring this video once again, very much appreciated. There is more I could have said, but I just started to creep into spoiler territory, so I don't want to do that. But what I can say is that I very much enjoyed this one. I didn't actually play the first one, so I'll now go and play that one and see how it all resolves itself. Quick thank you to our patrons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.